Thank you. Thanks, Nicky. It's great. So who's heard of Pingala? Who's seen someone speak about Pingala before? Okay, good. Yeah. I was concerned that, because we've been out there, we've been quite active in the community, I was concerned there'd be a lot of people who had heard about Pingala and would have to sort of be careful about not over-explaining things. Look, my name's Tom, and I've been involved with Pingala since the early days, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit around who Pingala is and why we exist, what we've been doing since we were first created, and that's a really important part of our story, the journey that we've been on, the big success that we've achieved recently in installing solar funded by the community at Young Henry's Brewery in Newtown. And finally, I'm going to finish off with what this means for the future, or what our plans are for the future. It's worth briefly telling you a little bit about myself. I wanted to make it clear that I actually have a day job. I work with Nicky at Community Power Agency, and I'm also one of the volunteers at Pingala. And the reason this came about was around about the end of 2012, I was working in one of these high-rise buildings in the city, working for a law firm, not as a lawyer, just in the IT department. And I was increasingly hearing this call inside of me that I wanted to make a positive contribution in the world. And strangely, I wasn't getting that working for a big commercial law firm. Personal circumstance meant that I was actually able to listen to that voice, and I quit my job and I started looking for what I wanted to do. And it was around that time that I heard about this event that was being organised about community energy. And that really is the very beginning of where Pingala came from. For me, the reason I got so involved in this community energy piece is because I'm super motivated by anything that makes the world a fairer place. I fundamentally think that if we would only share things more, not only the benefits that exist in the world, but also the burdens, then so many of the problems that we have in the world would disappear. I'm a bit of an idealist, but it's good to have that foundation of a vision that you work towards. And for me, community energy just ticks so many of those boxes. So where did Pingala come from? Well, like all good stories, or many good stories, it started with a conversation. Pingala's founder, April, she was actually having a conversation with a friend of hers, Nicky, about this increasing dissatisfaction with being involved in the climate movement and always complaining about the situation, always talking about the negative impacts of environmental degradation and the growing reality of climate change and the climate emergency, and not being able to do enough to actually make a positive contribution to that. And so what they decided to do was to organise an event, what we would commonly call a town hall event. And they organised for there to be guest speakers talking about the subject of community energy. I believe Nicky gave a speech not wildly dissimilar to the one she just gave. There were other energy experts at the event, and over 200 people turned up, and it was a great success. It was held at Redfern Town Hall. But at that event, people were invited to attend a workshop, an inception workshop. And I was one of the 20 people that turned up. And at that event, we were facilitated through really setting out what is our vision for energy, what is the problem that we're trying to fix, how we're going to fix that, and coming up with some tangible next steps for what we would do about that. And since then, Pingala's had the benefit of having this really solid core team of about 20 to 40 volunteers who have been with the organisation more or less since that date. That was on St Patrick's Day in 2017. 2013, sorry. This year is 2017. over that period, we've taken the original ideas that we spoke about, and we've continued to talk about them amongst ourselves. And these days, we can articulate very clearly what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and what is the vision that we have of how we can go about solving that. In a nutshell, the problem that we're trying to solve is that we think our energy system is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally broken, and it's unfair. I won't go into too much detail, but the way our energy system works is based around this idea that somewhere outside of Sydney, we dig coal out of the ground. We literally turn up the landscape of the community that we're impacting up there, destroying their land forever. We also rain down particulate pollution onto those communities and destroy other industries. And while we admit that there's a benefit to those local communities in the form of jobs and industry, we think those benefits are drastically overstated. What happens next is that coal is trained to a power station. So it travels down in open trains, and it rains down more particulate pollution, causing huge health impacts on local communities. It's then burned in a coal-fired power station, adding to the massive problem that we have of climate change. It's converted into electricity, and it's transmitted on these big transmission lines down to Sydney, where we turn on a light and we have electricity. Now, who gets the benefit of all of this? Well, far too often, it's distant shareholders, faceless, nameless shareholders. If you're lucky, they're in a stock exchange in Sydney, but far too often they're actually overseas, perhaps in Singapore, New York or London. And the communities that are being impacted are getting nowhere near enough of the benefits, and the consumers that are using the energy are also getting nowhere near enough of the benefits. So what we're trying to do is to fix a fundamentally flawed and broken energy system, and we're going to do that by building a fairer energy system. We have a big audacious goal, and one day we want to be a major energy provider, providing fairer energy to the communities that make up Sydney and disadvantaged communities further afield. So we set ourselves up with that foundation. We were able to articulate that with this large group of volunteers at the beginning, and that's a wonderful foundation to start from, but how do we actually go about implementing anything from that big idea? Now, there's no point us trying to suddenly become a big energy organisation. And so what we decided to do was quite sensibly look around at what some other organisations had done in the area and kind of copy what they've done. And so we set ourselves on this path of trying to develop a mechanism by which local community members could invest their money, pay for local renewable energy and generate a return so they can achieve solving the problems with our energy system, use their money for good, and to achieve benefits for the local community as a result of that. Now, it's been a really interesting journey. It's taken us took us 3 years to get our first project across the line, and we finally succeeded in doing that a year ago. But along the way, we've had to deal with many challenges, many victories, many setbacks along the way. And it's just been a fascinating experience to be involved with it. I feel deeply privileged to have been involved with Pingala so heavily for that whole time. And along the way, we've actually built our capacity, built our sense of community, and we've already received huge rewards because of what we've done. And one of the best ways I can think of to describe this is to tell the story of how we made a video about ourselves. I'll try and do this fairly quickly, but what we realised is that if we were going to really communicate to the broader community of Sydney what it is that we were all about, we needed to communicate in more human terms and to use some smart ways of communicating, not just words on a page, but video and talking heads talking about what their passions were. And so what we did is we looked around amongst ourselves and we said, great, we want to do a video. We want to do a little promotional video. Now, does anybody have any skills? And like we so often find, we don't have the skills within ourselves. We're a great group of people. We don't have every skill that exists under the sun. And so we go, all right, well, what are we going to do? Well, we'll look around and see if we know anybody. Perhaps we can recruit some volunteers or get someone to agree to do this stuff with us, and we exhaust a lot of our time and effort trying to recruit someone to the organisation. And we go, okay, that's not working. And so maybe what we can do is we can apply for some grant funding or get someone to help us pay for a video. And we spend a lot of time exhausting ourselves trying to get that to happen. And finally, we just get a little bit fed up and we say, you know what, we've actually done some research and we've got this thing called the internet now, and we're smart people and we can do it ourselves. And so we decide that we're going to do it ourselves. And we formed a committee, and we came up with a script, and the script was complex and long. And we filmed everything, and we made this 5-minute long, wordy, lots of information video. And we knew that what we had wasn't particularly good, but we didn't quite know what to do about it. And around that time, we actually convinced someone who was a videographer to give us some advice. And they looked at it and they said to us, wow, it looks like this video was made by a committee. I was like, yeah, it was. And so what we decided was 3 of us would actually take all of that information. And by then we've actually skilled ourselves up quite well. And we just went and did it. We recruited some family members to be the sort of actors in it. And we made this, what I think is actually quite a wonderful 60-second commercial for Pingala. You can see it on our website. And the reason I tell you this story is because that's the story of kind of what we've done in so many things that we've done. Now, you could look back and say, look, it was a big mistake to form that committee, and we would never make that mistake again, and we've learnt and grown. But in a way, that's actually the way that we work, and it's the right thing to do to involve everyone and figure out how to do it. We often look at each other, nudge each other and go, like, it's crazy the things that we now know, the skills that we now have that we didn't have before. We know things about the Corporations Act, legalities of setting up new organisations. We know things about crowdfunding legislation, which is just mind-boggling. We know how to make videos. We know how to do community organising in a way that we just couldn't have conceived that we would ever know. I like to describe the experience of doing this sort of thing as walking into a series of rooms with 100 doors. And you don't know which door to walk into to go through in any room. Unbeknownst to you, it's the first room, it's door 64. And of course, the next time you walk into the first room, you know, and you're able to just walk straight to door 64. And Nicky's analogy about the Rubik's Cube is spot on. If you know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, you can do it in about 6 seconds or less. So where did that journey take us? Well, ultimately, we succeeded in getting our first project across the line. And we were really lucky to have been introduced to a pretty amazing organisation called Young Henry's Brewery. They're based in Newtown. Has anybody heard of Young Henry's? Yeah, has anybody enjoyed their beer? They're not on tap tonight, unfortunately, but an equally nice brewery batch is on tap. Now, what we found in Young Henry's was an organisation that genuinely shared our values and vision. And for me personally, I knew that they did when I went to the bathroom after halfway through a meeting, and I found that the brand of toilet paper they had was exactly the brand of toilet paper we'd have if we had premises. Who gives a crap? And there are a range of other reasons why we thought they might be a good fit as well. But what ultimately happened is we formed ourselves as a cooperative because we found that cooperative values were closely aligned with our values. We sold shares in the cooperative, and we used that money to pay to install solar on the roof of Young Henry's. They now lease those solar panels off us, and we use that income to pay our costs and generate a modest surplus, and we distribute that surplus to our members in the form of a dividend every year. We give about a 5 to 8% return on investment to the people that invested their money. We try to do that in a way which is accessible as possible. So unlike many organisations who say you need to have 2 for $8,000, we came in with $250. So what we actually did is we did a crowdfunding event. We didn't use a web platform. Instead, we used an actual real crowd at Young Henry's premises, and we had 200 local people turn up and make a commitment that they wanted to invest in solar on the roof of Young Henry's. We sold all those shares in 9 minutes. And 54 people are now members of that cooperative, and they'll be looking to get their first dividends fairly soon. So where do we go next? Well, for us, we still have a very clear vision, and we've still got a very clear sense that we're working towards something which is a big outcome. But of course, it makes so much sense that what we should work on right now is replicating what we've done. So we wanted to be able to do more solar panels on more local businesses, funded by more local community members, allowing them to create stronger links with business and organisations and the community. Now, once we've done that a few times, we'll then start thinking about whether or not we can do some other sort of new innovative energy model that will achieve the sort of goals that we're working towards. We'll probably think very seriously about solar for apartment buildings or people that can't put solar on their roofs, and that's a big issue in Sydney, particularly in the inner suburbs of Sydney. We certainly are really interested in the ways that we might be able to have a more direct link with our members and the community members that make up Sydney. So whether or not we can partner with an electricity retailer or become our own electricity retailer and offer Pingala Energy, a trusted energy brand in Sydney, that'll be something we consider. But ultimately, we're going to be delivering fair and trusted energy to the communities that make up Sydney. And I've no doubt that we will succeed in our goal of becoming a major energy provider. As we do that, we're going to build our foundations, and we're actively doing that now. We know that if we're going to be successful in achieving our bigger things, then we need to make sure that we're ready to tackle those. And in short, we want nothing less to turn the energy system upside down. We want the ownership structure to completely change, and we want the benefits to be delivered to a completely different set of beneficiaries, the people that make up Sydney. So Nigel's going to come up and tell you a little bit about how you can become a volunteer and his story as well.